Some of the biggest challenges of online learning are cheating and academic dishonesty. So in this video, I want to give you some tips on how you can minimize cheating. I say minimize because, let's be real here, we as teachers won't be able to completely eliminate cheating. I'm going to focus on the G Suite for education tools, but before we dive into the whole problem of cheating, I want to take a look at the assessment cycle real quick, because it will come up later in the slideshow. So the first type of assessment is assessment for learning, and this is also called formative assessment. This type of assessment is used by teachers to gather data about the students and then adjust their teaching accordingly. The second type is assessment as learning, and here the students develop the metacognitive skills to evaluate their own learning and make adjustments themselves. Sometimes this also includes peer assessments. And the third type is assessment of learning. This is also called summative assessment, and in this type of assessment, teachers compare students' performance to some kind of benchmark, for example, standards or other groups of students. Now let's move on to the main point of this video, which is how do we minimize cheating? You can see that in this graph, I put academic honesty on top of three major pillars. And those pillars are, we need to understand why students cheat so we can take away their motivation for cheating. The second pillar is we need to design our assessments in a way that we take away opportunities for cheating. And the third major pillar is we need to use Google tools effectively to take away the means for cheating. I'm going to give you tips on those three pillars in the next slides, and you just need to remember that the lists are non-exhaustive. And if you want to add to the discussion, then you can post your comments below. So now let's have a look at some of the reasons why students might cheat and what we can do to take away their motivation for cheating. The first point is actually, well, it has two components. They usually go hand in hand, and it's a combination of high-stakes tests and a perceived lack of ability, which means there's a lot on the table and the students don't think that they would be successful during that high-stakes test. So what we can do is we can build up their confidence over time by giving them a lot of opportunities for practice, and during that time we give them constant feedback to build up their confidence. So when the time arrives that they have to take that high-stakes test, then hopefully they will feel well prepared and they don't feel the need for cheating. The second point is they might cheat because there's a competition with other students, especially when they are graded on a curve. So for example, if you decide that in your class only the top 15% of students receive an A, that limits the number of A grades, and that naturally leads to competition. So what you can do is, instead of using a curve, you use criterion-based grading, which means the number of grades is unlimited. And then there is less competition, which means the students will be less inclined to cheat. The third point is a simple lack of awareness. Students may not know that what they are doing is cheating. For example, in primary school, students may not be aware of the fact that when they copy something from the internet and they put it in their slideshow, that's actually plagiarism. So what we need to do is we need to explicitly teach students what's acceptable and what's not, how to cite sources, how to find material on the internet, or even things like how to use pictures that are labeled for reuse. And that way we don't just prepare them for academic work at school, but later for their life when they have to be at work as well. Then there's this perceived possibility of cheating without getting caught. And how to address that, I will explain in the next slides. All these points that I have just talked about and more, you will also find on the Carnegie Mellon University website, and the link is in the description below. So if you want to dig deeper to understand why students might cheat, then this is a good place to start. The second pillar of academic honesty is assessment design, and that means that we need to design our assessments in a way that make it difficult to cheat. Now, the first thing that may come to mind is a focus on higher order thinking skills. In other words, we need to ask ungoogleable questions. If you look at Bloom's taxonomy, anything that is not remembering or understanding is a higher order thinking skill, and they include applying, analyzing, synthesizing, evaluating, and creating. A second idea is we need to focus on assessment for learning and assessment as learning more than assessment of learning. And what that means is you can have students hand in their work incrementally, so you can follow them on their learning journey and you can see how they tackle the task. You should also give them a lot of opportunities for self and peer assessment so that they develop metacognitive thinking and think about their own work and other students' work. You can also give them choices. For example, you can tell them that they have 20% of their study time allotted for completing a project to demonstrate learning. Then you can have students present and defend the work, because if they have to explain what they did, how they did it, and why they did it that way, you can easily check if they have done the work on their own, and you can check their understanding as well. Then why not involve parents in the assessment process? You could, for example, share a simple rubric with the parents and ask them to check the reading level of the children, or, well, anything really. It depends on how involved your parents are in general and on the topic that you're doing. But it's always worth thinking about how to involve the parents. Finally, it's important that you provide clear guidelines on what is acceptable collaboration and what is plagiarism. Because, as I said earlier, some students just might not know that copying and pasting something from the internet is not allowed. So having clear guidelines in place and explicitly teaching those study skills is essential in assessment design. Finally, let's have a look at how we can use Google tools to minimize cheating. Now, I just talked about asking ungoogleable questions. So the first thing you might want to do is use Google search and check for answers to your questions. So if the answer to your question is available on Google, then you might want to rephrase your question or maybe not ask that question at all. You can also use originality reports in Google Classroom, and I posted a link in the description below, or you can click on the pop-out banner to go to a video where I explain how to use originality reports. You can use the revision history in any Google app to check if maybe a large amount of text has been pasted, which might indicate plagiarism. And you can also check who contributed to a group project and when, to make sure that all of the group members were involved in the process. There's a Google Docs extension available called Draftback, which would play back the revision history, and that way you get to see very easily how a student tackled the task and how a student created a Google Doc over time. If you're using managed Chromebooks, you can use the locked mode in Google Forms so that the students cannot access other tabs, for example. Then, to foster the students' metacognitive skills and as a way, assessment as learning, you can ask students to create a portfolio and record their progress and reflect on their work and reflect on your feedback using slides, docs, or sites. Again, there's a link in the description below where I explain how to use Google Sites to create a portfolio. If you use Google Meet and Jamboard, you can ask students to present the work live. And that way you get a good understanding if they have understood what they're talking about or if they maybe got some help. If students are unable to present the work live, then you can ask them to create a video and upload that onto YouTube or any other video tool really, where they explain their process and explain their thinking. So as I said, these lists that I've just given you, they are non-exhaustive. If you have any other ideas, if you want to contribute to the discussion, then please write a comment below. Otherwise, thank you for watching.